Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is Sufism, or Islamic mysticism. My guest is Charles Upton, who has been a practicing Sufi for over a quarter century. He is the author of over 20 books on the traditionalist movement and its metaphysics, including folk metaphysics, mystical meanings in traditional folk songs and spirituals, knowings in the arts of metaphysics, cosmology, and the spiritual path, the science of the greater jihad, essays in principial psychology, Day and Night on the Sufi path, the system of the Antichrist, truth and falsehood in postmodernism and the New Age, vectors of the counter-initiation, the course and destiny of inverted spirituality, and most recently, the alien disclosure deception, the metaphysics of social engineering. Charles is in Lexington, Kentucky, and now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Charles. It's a pleasure to be with you once again.
Yes, the same here. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's always a delight.
Well, we're going to be exploring Sufism. I know it's been a passion of yours for, must be well over 3 decades now.
Yeah, I guess 1988 was when I took that step.
And I'm sure our viewers understand that Sufism is Islamic mysticism. But other than that, for the viewers who haven't ever participated in Sufi communities or activities, it must seem very mysterious. So to begin with, let's try and define it. I imagine one way to look at Sufism is that it's you could say it's comparable to yoga for Hinduism, but then again, it's very different than yoga.
Yeah, it's similar. You know, in other words, it has a method, but the difference, I would say, between yoga and a lot of spiritual methods and Sufism is that, well, you could say that the purpose of yoga is to reach particular states, particular types of samadhi, which are defined, and you work toward that goal. And while that is in a way that happens in Sufism, it's just very important. The Sufis always emphasize that states are not acquisitions; they are gifts. They're gifts of Allah. Because if you think, well, I've reached this degree of moral rectitude, and I've done these spiritual practices, and so I expect God to come through and give me a state, and where's this state, And so Sufis are very careful to say we do not bargain with God. We do our part, He does His part, and it's important to separate them and not make a one-on-one equation between them, because that's thinking you can control God or bargain with Him, and we don't believe that.
I noticed in your book, Day and Night on the Sufi Path, that you refer to God in the masculine gender, as you just did, and you refer to the soul, or Nafs, in the feminine gender.
There are various reasons for that. Some of them are simply historical and culturally determined, as we would all that would be the first thought of many people nowadays. Now, Allah is not considered to have gender, and yet Allah is compared to figures familiar to Arabs of the time and familiar to us today, which we generally think of as masculine. It's Lord of the worlds, owner of the day of judgment, and so one would say that God, who in his essence is beyond gender, and I have to say that the second most important name of God is Al-Rahman, the All-Merciful, and the Quran even says you can call him Allah or you can call him Al-Rahman. So it's that that close, and this comes from an Arabic root for womb, which is a feminine noun. So you can, and I believe, I may be wrong here because I'm not an Arabist, but I think al-Zat, which is the essence, the unknowable absolute essence of God, is also a feminine gender. I could be wrong. But in relationship to the manifest universe, and this is very common in mysticism for many traditions, God is seen as active, which is what we have traditionally attributed to the masculine gender, and the soul is seen as receptive. And so, there are some mystics who say that a man must become a woman, in order to be responsive to the will of God. Whereas Muslims have a harder time saying that. They tend to say women are just as good as men. In fact, really good women become men. So that's, which is a little difficult for us to deal with these days. But there's Allah, who is absolute reality and beyond polarity, beyond gender. And then there's, if there is action, we say the action is Allah's action. There's a verse in the Quran says Allah, has created you and what you do, which sounds like pure, deterministic predestination. You're just a mere puppet of God. So how could you presume to try to be good or try to achieve anything? He'll do a kind of a Calvinist idea. And really, that's just one verse. All the other verses, dozens and perhaps hundreds of them say, meet the mark, be good, strive, and then on the other hand, Allah has created you, but he's also created all your actions. So this becomes a mystical paradox. You put those together and you have, one of the perennial mystical paradoxes of all religions, at least all theistic religions.
Well, I guess it's fair to say that there are different versions of Sufism. I've had a chance to interview a few Sufi teachers along the way, and some of them maintain, for example, that Sufism is older than Islam, and it's been around much longer.
Well, yeah, that's, I do not hold to that that theory except provisionally. I mean, there are elements of a spiritual practice. I mean, if you want to look at certain elements of Sufism, I believe you can trace them back, in the Judeo, in the Christian and Jewish line, to periods before the prophet came and before the Quran descended. The use of a continuous invocation of the name of God, which is zikr, which means just remembrance. Well, the Christian hesychasts have mnimi theou, which is the same, literally the same as zikr Allah, remembrance of God. And in fact, if you want to compare something to Sufism, probably the closest comparison would be with Eastern Orthodox hesychasm. The same relationship to the spiritual master, the same methodology largely, and so many similarities. But what I believe is God sends dispensations. He sends revelations, and when a revelation comes, it becomes preeminent, and then various tributaries from other religions and from the past and from other cultures come, and they make obeisance or they give tribute to that new revelation and become stamped with its nature. So in that sense, Sufism comes entirely from the Prophet and from the Quran. I mean, as you probably saw in my book, there are many concepts in spiritual anthropology, the nature, the actual nature, deep nature of the human form, and in metaphysics and in different spiritual states and all of this, you can find verses from the Quran that directly refer to these. Some of them are referring to more external things at the same time, but the Sufis do a Batini, an inner exegesis of these, and says, well, that this is talking about the state of expansion. This is talking about the state of recollection. And so after the coming of the Prophet, it all became Islamic, and it was revivified and reauthorized by that revelation that descended upon Muhammad from Allah. So to that degree, it's all traceable back to Allah. But there are elements, it's interesting. La ilaha illallah is, the first part of the Shahada, which is that is, there is no God but God, and that's the most common form of the invocation of the name of God in Sufism. And that's also what one says along with Wa Muhammadun Rasulullah, which is, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. That's what a Muslim says before two male Muslims in order to enter the religion. That's all it takes. So it's very central. But then it's interesting that the war cry of the Zealots was, there is no Lord but God. Now, they meant something else. They meant we're not going to worship the Roman emperor, who is supposed to be a god, at least in the provinces. And here's this, we're supposed to use this Roman money with this symbol of the divine emperor on it. We'll have none of it. That's what they meant. So, in other words, you're going to see certain similarities. There's another one in the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of his time. At least one of these covenants talks about various, Christians who shall not be subject to tax, including monks and prelates and such as this, but also hermits. And it talks about hermits living in their towers in the wilderness, dressed in wool, which is very interesting. In other words, because one of the meanings of the word Sufi, and it has many different etymological meanings, is it means wool clad, and so you see, well, wait a minute, holy hermits, contemplative hermits, are recognized by the Prophet in the Christian world, obviously from before Islam, as being wool clad. So this is something. You see a connection, and it's very much, you could draw a connection between the Sufis and the Nazarites, because the Nazarites in Judaism were a spiritual brotherhood. Many of them were shepherds, and Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd. Well, the Good Shepherd dresses in wool, right? If he's he's the Lamb of God, and so he dresses in wool. So you see, lines of symbolism, lines of like this. But the impetus and the authorization and the command, to remember Allah, La ilaha illallah, came at one time to one man, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in his cave in Mount Hira, and when the Quran first descended. So that's the way I parsed that.
Well, one of the interesting facts that I discovered in your book, Day and Night on the Sufi Path, is that there is no monastic tradition within Islam or within Sufism.
There is no monasticism in Islam. Means that monasticism is not to be an established institution within the Islamic framework. Now, the Islamic, the closest thing to a monastery Islam is the various Sufi lodges, called zawiyas in Arabic and khanaqahs in Persian and tekkes in Turkish, But these are more lodges than they are monasteries. People go there on a temporary basis, or they go there for the meetings. And a lodge is probably the closest term we would have in English, to what these institutions are. Now, of course, there have always been hermits, and hermits have existed before Islam and within Sufism. And also there's this group called the al-Sufa, which means the people of it's translated as the people of the bench. And Sufa, this is another word that Sufism is etymologically related to in some people's minds. And I think this is more likely the actual derivation. This is where we get our word sofa from, So what happened is at the Prophet's house, there were people who collected around him who were contemplatives. And they spent time, basically doing their spiritual practices and praying and undoubtedly invoking the name of God at the Prophet's residence. And they became sort of the core of a contemplative strand within Islam that I'm pretty sure must have been one of the main origins of what later became Sufism. But they weren't separated from the rest of the community. Most of them were married, and I'm assuming that most of them had their own homes as well. So there's something very much like monasticism, but it's not separation from the community. That's the main difference.
Well, I suspect many of our viewers, because our audience, I think, is largely English-speaking, have had exposure to various Sufi organizations that have reached out to the West, the teachings of Idris Shah or Pir Vilayat Khan, and so on. People are probably familiar with the Sufi choir and Sufi dancing.
Sufi dancing. Oh, yeah, I did that for a while, yeah. Yeah, I actually met Sufi Sam, one of the founders the founder of Sufi dancing, on a couple of occasions. So, yeah. Well, I mean, this is a kind of was a bridge between Orthodox Sufism and what was going on in the West. I mean, when Pir Vilayat Khan came to the West, he was hosted by the Theosophical Society at one point, and he came more or less into the milieu and gave to them and to the people who were attracted to them the kind and level of teaching that he thought would be acceptable in the West. And it's a little bit Sufi Samuel Lewis did the same with the hippies in a later generation. And Idris Shah, who was Idris Shah? Reputed to be the king of the Sufis, of which there's no such thing. But anyway, his books were very interesting to me and my wife at one point. They were the bridge between all of the reading of Jungianism and Joseph Campbell and all the mythopoetic reading to the writings of the traditionalists, René Guénon and Fritjof Schumann. They were the bridge books, and you can read 100 of those books, in a summer and forget them all, but somehow they're still working on your unconscious, So, I mean, this is all very interesting material. But after Idris Shah, after Samuel Lewis, after Pir Vilayat Khan, started to come the more orthodox Sufi orders to the West, including the Namatalahis and the Shadilis, Qadiris, Naqshbandis, such. And Idris Shah sort of identified with the Naqshbandis, but he also thought that Sufism could be separated from Islam, which something can be separated from Islam and called Sufism. And I will not say that has no function whatsoever, but it's not Sufism in its fullness or in its, I mean, you can cut cut some flowers in your garden and put them in a vase, and they will be beautiful and smell nice for a day, and then they will die. So it has to remain connected to the root if it's going to go on.
Well, one of the important concepts in your writing is the notion of the jihad. You have a book on the greater jihad, and you contrast that with the lesser jihad. Can you explain what you mean?
There is a hadith, a tradition of the Prophet, where I forget what battle it was, but he and his warriors were returning from a battle back to the community, and the Prophet said, well, now we return from the lesser war to the greater war. And they asked him, what is the greater war? What is the greater struggle? And he said, the war against the soul. Now that sounds strange in our terms, because to us, soul is generally something spiritual, something, essential to the human being, something positive, something you want to realize and you want to, and so what's this war against the soul? Well, that is the word, the English translation of the word nafs. And nafs, yes, it means soul, but it's a complex concept. I mean, one Sufi, Dr. Javad Nurbakhsh, who's of the Na'matullahi order, passed away some years ago. He was the head of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Tehran. And he said something like, Western psychology has everything to learn from Sufism. Sufism has nothing to learn from Western psychology. But that was, but basically he said, well, the nafs is like the Freudian idea of the id, the lower self, the impulsive self. And that's partly true. I mean, and that's entirely true in so far as it goes and insofar as he went in saying that. But there are many other elements to it. So essentially, we're talking before we started about, defining what Sufism is in its essence. And I think I would like to try to do that. And this will take us back to the question of the nafs, but with some context to it. So, what is Sufism? I think in the simplest way, you would say this is the endeavor and the practice of being constantly aware of the presence of God under all circumstances, which is, you can say, I believe God is everywhere. I believe God is all-knowing. I believe God is all-loving. But how does this become a living experience? That's essentially, if there is a goal, that's the goal. And this is the purpose of the constant remembrance of God and through the invocation of the name of God. But the question is, as we all know, we may try. I'm going to say from now on, I will only remember God. I know that God is everywhere, and I'm simply going to see that from now on. Well, fine, but it doesn't usually work out that way. We get distracted. We get whole universes of thought, feeling, and projection and psychological stuff are created that get in the way of you in that very simple reality. And in terms of Sufism, what creates all of that stuff, all of that misdirection away from the simple presence of God is called the Nafs. Now, the Nafs has different levels, however, or different stages of development. So what we're talking about now is the Nafs al-amara bil-su, which means the Nafs commanding to evil. And that's simply your impulsive self. I want this, so I'll do it. I want that, so I'll grab it. I want to think this and let my mind go off in some tangent, so I'll do it. And this is who we are before we have much of a sense at all of the reality of God and of what the human being would be in our fullness in the presence of God, because we're only in our fullness, in our integrity, in that presence. So this is the commanding nafs. And there's some people whose idea of self-realization is to become one with the commanding nafs. What I try to do is to become one with my impulses, because otherwise I get nervous and I feel bad, and I don't want that. So I will just completely do whatever my impulses say. And we see people acting like that, and even in some instances trying to create a religion on that basis. And this doesn't work out very well, generally speaking, as the human race has discovered over many millennia. So we have the commanding nafs. Now, what do you do about the commanding nafs? The war against the soul. Then you get to the place where, that commanding nafs, and you don't notice that there's such a thing as the nafs until you have a sense of the presence of God and a sense that there are at least moral rules that have to be followed. When you have those rules in place, then you start to see that there's something that does not like that you are following those rules and does not want you to spend all your time thinking about God. You should think about, lust and greed and anger and all sorts of other things that are much more interesting than God, So the nafs only appears as the nafs when you have made the spiritual commitment. Then suddenly you see, wait a minute, I am not master in my own house. There's another master here who's trying to get me to do something that I don't want to do, or I've said I don't want to do, but maybe I do want to do it because to the degree I identify with that nafs, well, that's me too. Well, maybe I should do it half the time. And you go back and forth. Well, okay, you may make a commitment to say, I will quash this nafs, I will quash these passions. That's the, now, the gloves are off. Well, you will quickly find that you cannot quash the nafs. The nafs is too powerful. And one of the biggest reasons you can't quash the nafs is because the intent to use self-will to quash the nafs is actually part of the nafs. That's one of the things the nafs likes to do, is believe it's master in its own house and can control everything and determine everything. So that's part of the problem. So once you get to that place, you say, well, this isn't working out, and you start to feel very bad because you see you're not meeting the mark and you don't know how to proceed. And this is the next stage of the development of the nafs, which is the accusing nafs. Now you say, well, I can't do it. I cannot get my life together. I can't, it's how will I ever, reach this impossible spiritual goal? And there's a lot of internal struggle. And the nafs also gets in the way of your connecting with God by saying, you failed. You cannot meet your goal. How you'll never get there. You'll never get there. And if this is where this nafs needs to be a little quiet, and then you realize you were already there. Really, if it weren't for the distractions of your impulses and then the distractions of your uneasy conscience. And both are distractions. One is a higher level of distraction than the other because it has some sense of what your duties are in life and that you need to fulfill them. But still, it doesn't get you anywhere beyond internal conflict. And so finally, the point comes, by the grace of God, inshallah, that through a series of what's called the education of the nafs learns how not to struggle against the will of God. And what is the will of God? The will of God is actually what is going on right now on the deepest level, beyond you and your impulses and you and your worries about yourself. Something deeper than that. And it's already going on and it's already there. And what you need to do is recognize its presence and then understand how to say yes to it and how to be obedient to it. We don't like the idea of obedience, but obedience to what is going on means your will is in line with reality. And when your will is fully in line with reality, then you start to get into the level that is called the Nafs al-Mutma'inah, which is the self at peace. The nafs the accusing Nafs is the Nafs al-Lawama, and then we get to the Nafs al-Ma'ina, which is the soul at peace. And this is the idea, this is the essence of Islam. Islam is, as often pointed out, the word Islam comes from the same root as the word salam, which means peace. Peace in the sense of completeness, flawlessness, no chinks or holes that cause internal conflict, a fullness, a completeness, a rest. That's what salam is. So in the course of the Sufi path, this is what one hopes to get to, is the self at peace, looking at it in terms of the Nafs. Now, there's other ways to look at it. You look at it in terms of the spiritual states and in terms of metaphysical realizations and things like this. But Sufism has innumerable perspectives. And there's really no way to step back and say, well, how do we put all this together? And here it says this, then over here it says this, and now it's saying this. And if you try to use your mind to put it all together, you will go crazy. It cannot be done. But these are all teachings that arise at different points when necessary.
One of the characteristics that I think most people understand are associated with Sufism, is poetry. Sufism is noted for having great poets like Rumi.
Indeed. Well, that's interesting, because just before you appeared, I went and I got a little thing on my computer here, which I can read you. Since you said poetry, now I get to read a poem. It's not by me. It is by Rumi, but I was given the opportunity to write poetic versions of Rumi's collected quatrains. Quatrains, he wrote the Mathnavi. Mathnavi is his big book, but that means couplets. It was all written in couplets. But also he wrote many, you might say even occasional quatrains. And there's a big collection of these that were translated by Ibrahim Gamard and Rahwan Farhadi. And they came to me and they said, write poetic versions of these. We've got it down to, correct literal translations, which is the first step. Now make them poetic. So I was doing this, and then I got a computer crash, and I lost most of them, because really I could have spent my life doing that and never come out again, because it's a big bunch of stuff. And but what I did, there was some of them which naturally, for some reason, wanted to go into rhymed iambic pentameter, so they became something very close to Western verse. And that's not been done a lot. So what I have here is something that are the lyrics of a song that somebody could put to music, and it would be a song, an English poem, or a song, in English lyrics, but by Rumi. And I haven't seen a lot of that. There'll be readings of Rumi and then to the ney accompaniment, or there'll be, once in a while there'll be a little rhyme or something like meter, but not a complete rhymed and metered poem that can be sung. So this is what I came up with. So imagine this sung. So it has no title, because these are taken from many, many different parts of the book, and they just came together like this. So it goes like this. What is this sorrow grips me like the night? Is it blind? Does it see me lost to light? Earth shows my image, yet in heaven I'm free. What hand can lift a star from off the sea? Who claims the ever-living one has died? The sun of hope is gone, his days are done. Sun killer climbed the roof and shut his eyes, then cried out like a fool, I've killed the sun. Every day my heart drinks one new wine, whose sweetness kills the taste of all wines past. He first ferments love sickness, that wine master, and then serves up oblivion at last. Anyone might have a friend or lover, anyone hold a job or play a part, Like the prophet and his Khalif in their cavern, I'm with him in the furnace of my heart. That love from which my lifeless life takes life, a love so fine, so sweet, where does it live? Is it from mortal flesh or from beyond it, or a glance that he to Breeze's sun might give? Oh, wounded heart, your cure has finally come. Breathe easy now, your healing has been born. A love who grants the wish of every lover has come into this world in human form. To behold the beauty of the King, what joy! My soul takes life from that exquisite face. In a dream, I saw the black chains of his love. What could it mean? That dream disturbs my peace. That musky Tatar curl is pure delight. To hunt a prey like me, delightful sport. In spring, in early spring, the world is sweet, like sugar and candy holding hands, so right. From your tall shape the cypress stole its grace. The rose tore open its shirt when it saw your face. For God's sake, lift a mirror, then you'll see not one like me from end to end of space. Did the perfumed rose ever catch your scent? No, never. Have the sun or stars ever seen your light? No, never. It's night, you say, behold my darkened window. If you go, it's night, but otherwise, no, never. I found no peace. I died of shame without you. When I came to court, I quit my life without you. Without you, how can I break the grip of sorrow? Cloaked with loss, I cried tears of blood without you. I'll tear my heart from your ground, I say, but I can't. I'll learn to breathe without you, but I can't. I'll drive your longing from my heart, I brag. If I were man enough, I'd do it, but I can't. I have no one, only you. Where can I turn? No cure for this ravaged heart. Where can I turn? How long, you ask, will we whirl with the whirling stars? It's the only trade I know. Where can I turn? You'll get no help from me, my friend, he said, just silly drunkenness and wine and laughter. To kill to sobriety and drive out reason is why God sent me down into this slaughter. I'll take the blame for you 100 times. If I break my pledge to you, I'll pay the price. As long as I draw a breath, I'll stand your blows till the day of resurrection. This you know. Your slap is sweeter than another's kiss. Your wound is richer than another's gift. Your cruelty kinder than another's care. Your insult dearer than another's bliss. If I fill the sky with groans, I am forgiven. If I water the plain with tears, I am forgiven. You are my soul. That's why I must pursue you. And if soul follows self instead, I am forgiven. The water of life dropped from your shining face. Of that world of light, the moon is just a trace. I want moonlight, moonlight all night long, I cried. The night is your night black curls, the moon your face. Oh, friend, my friendship makes a mighty union. Where you might walk, I'll be the earth for you. In the creed of lovers, it's a dark transgression through your eyes to see the world, but not see you. I'm glad this passing world can't make me happy. Drunk without wine, superb intoxication. Why do I need to hear some other's story when endless blessings rise from my secret glory? May the heart of love never look upon this world. What's worthy to be seen by love but love? The day I die, I'll cast away these eyes, if, in gazing on this world, they turned from love. This dying earth, how long to smell and taste it? It's time to meet that one of perfect grace. In the mirror of his face, I find myself. In the mirror of my heart, I'll see his face. The fruit will set on the blossoming branch someday. The hungry hawk will seize the dove someday. His image comes and goes. When will it stay? It will make its home inside your heart someday. Well, Rumi, who do we have in the West to compare to Rumi? Shakespeare, Dante, Blake, nobody else. I mean, really, Dante is the only one that really measures up.
That was magnificent. And I guess it was Rumi, but it was also you.
Well, yeah, it has to be. And then now it's also you because it went through you. So it goes on, you know.
It seems as if poetry is so important in Sufism because there are truths that can't be expressed any other way.
That's true. That's true. And also, you know, there's music in Sufism as well. If you ever listen to classical Ottoman music, which is the music that's played in the Mevlevi Sema, you know, with the whirling dervishes. I mean, just and also, you know, classical Persian music is magnificent. They're consciously spiritual. You know, like Gregorian chant. They're not like Gregorian chant in style or in feel, but they have the same conscious relationship to spirituality. So, but of course, the other thing that Rumi said about poetry is he compared it to tripe. He says poetry is really, really distasteful to me. You know, it's like tripe. It's like, you know, I have friends who like poetry. You know, it's like having friends who have a taste for tripe, and I invite them over to my house, and I have to be hospitable to them. I have to be hospitable to them, and so I cook up a big pot of tripe, and I have to be up to my elbows in tripe. That's fine, and you know that's what they like. I'll serve them, but really, it's quite distasteful to me, which is important to say too. You know, there's a surah in the Quran called the Poets, and it's the only. It really talks about the danger of poetry. You know, it said, you know, who shall I show you those upon whom the Satans descend? They wander distraught in every valley, and you know, and the erring follow them. They wander distraught in every valley and say that which they do not, which is the danger, because the words become exquisite, and then you've said the words and you think the work is done, and it's not. That's just the words. You know, that's the advertisement. And you're supposed to be beyond the advertisement. You're supposed to be, well, you know, the beauty of all this poetry got me down into this, you know, this salt mine where I have to labor away for 20 years, you know. At least I wouldn't be here, and I'm glad to be here because this is where the work is done. You know, you need, and there's mercy and there's relief and there's expansion and there's touching of the heart. But there's the hard work and the you know, as is described in the poetry. You know, it keeps going back and forth between, you know, deliverance, the cure has come, you know, the beauty of the king has come, and now, you know, I'm cried tears of blood without you. And that's very much part and parcel of the alternation of Sufi states. It's not like one is I'm going toward, you know, Savikalpa Samadhi, and then I will reach Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and then, God willing, it will be Sahaja Samadhi. It's not like that. It's, you know, you are, as in Persian poetry often makes this comparison, your head is like the polo ball on the court, and God is the one with a mallet, you know, bam, you know, the idea that you're always being overwhelmed by the actions of God, and ultimately there's nothing that isn't an action. You know, the expansive spiritual beautiful states and the states of terrible remorse and self-hatred or just dullness and heaviness, these are all God turning your heart in different directions so that you will learn different things and be purified of different egos, and this is this. So, you know, this idea of, you know, I've sometimes, you know, semi-humorously said that Sufism is a spiritual path for the bipolar. You know, there's something like that to it, but it's very much, you know, and then, you know, God willing, the alterations moderate, because they moderate when the sense of a separate individual that could be subject to all those states begins to fade away. It's not that the individual gets the great state and it stays. No, the individual that's subject to all the different states slowly fades away. And there's nothing but God. So that's what the Sufis say anyway.
You place a lot of emphasis on the idea of the sheikh in Sufism, and the notion, I think, that the sheikh is an exemplar or a representative of this state of God expressing itself through one.
Yes, the sheikh is very important, and I have to say that at this point, I'm with a Sufi order that is without a sheikh, and our sheikh, went through a guru meltdown, just like the classic guru meltdown that we've seen so many times, and our sheikh did it too. He did a really one of the best versions of it I've ever seen. It was so total and so fast. But so here we sit and we say, we do not have a living sheikh, but we are in the lineage of the living sheikhs and the silsila and the transmission of the teachings, and God willing, the grace of the path has come to us through the line of sheikhs. So here we sit, just meeting once a week on Zoom, about 40 people around the world, and we continue, because who knows, maybe the next sheikh will be the Mahdi. Who knows? Or maybe God will send another sheikh. We don't know. But there's because the sheikh is absolutely necessary. The one who can heal the pain of every lover is come into this world in human form. That's the sheikh. That's Rumi talking about Shams Tabrizi. But the form comes and then the form goes. It's like Jesus said, I have to go because if I didn't go, the paraclete, the spirit could not come. So that's always the way it is. You need the actual human transmission of someone who has realized. And on the other hand, you will become, you will turn him into an idol if he doesn't go at one point. And of course, death takes him. But our last sheikh, there's some people who stayed with him no matter how corrupt he was because he's the sheikh. And there's others who just gave up and their hearts were broken. And they say, we don't know what to do now. And I'm in the third group that says, as Abu Bakr said after the Prophet passed away, the Prophet passed away and the Muslims were distraught and tearing their hair. And Abu Bakr said, if you worship Muhammad, know that he is dead. If you worship Allah, know that he never dies. So this is what we have to say when our sheikh disappears, exactly that. And so it's an opportunity. Because every expression of the truth becomes also a veil over the face of the truth. Every time. It has to happen that way. And that's what's dangerous about beautiful veils like the poetry of Rumi. You say, that's it. Well, that isn't it either. There's a Sufi practice called fikr, which just means, it's translated as contemplation. But as I understand it, and this may not be the only understanding, it's related to the word fakir, which means poor one. That's another synonym of Sufi. It's exactly what Jesus meant when he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see God. Blessed are the fukara, the fakirs, for they shall see God. And so the poverty, how does poverty relate to contemplation? Well, you contemplate, the unnameable, the unknowable. It's not entirely unknowable because all knowledge is streaming from Allah at every moment. Knowledge of anything, not just of him, but all of his manifestations. And so, and yet, who he is in himself, what he is in himself, you can't quite get it. You get, a magnificent version of who God is. And then, it comes to you as a magnificent gift from God. This is who I am. This is my name. Speak my name and you will come to me. Here I am. And then a second later, that beautiful vision becomes a terrible veil. But that's not him. That's just something he sent. That's now only a thought in my mind. That's nothing. Who is he really? And you keep going, you keep peeling away the different versions of him that he sends you, trying, to get farther. And you can't get behind the veil because you are part of the veil. So what really happens is as you're peeling away those layers, you're peeling away layers of yourself. And when you are gone, then there's only God, and you don't have to worry about whether you understand him or not.
I know one of the traps that you wrote about is this very idea that God is always there all the time in every way and everything, and therefore I'm already one with God, so there's nothing more to do.
Yeah, or as some people will say, that means I can do anything I want. That's another good one. It's a lot of, yeah, and it's, and then that belief becomes another, limited belief that becomes a barrier, and all the beliefs get peeled away. And it's funny to talk about Sufism because usually people who talk about Sufism are scholars of religion, who study it from the outside and have some interesting things to say, or there are sheikhs who say, I am, at least for you, for those who've accepted me in this role, I am the proof of what I say, and that because it's interesting what a sheikh can say something which if anybody else said it, it would just be a moral platitude or something not very interesting. But when the sheikh says it, along with his saying of it comes to you the power to realize what he has said. That's what makes the words of a sheikh different from the words of a philosopher. The philosopher may even be more interesting intellectually, but the sheikh says something very simple, but he's saying it with existential completeness, and what he says has the power to be realized. I'm something in between a philosopher and a sheikh. I'm a poet, which means, it all comes in little flashes. Poetry is so intermittent. Poetry is just flash, and and then it's gone. So that's. I don't know what happens to those flashes after they go. I've never seen what they do. They go somewhere and do something.
Well, Charles, this has been a magnificent conversation. I'm so delighted that you shared your poetry and your passion for Sufism. I know it's an endless topic. We could have 100 more conversations like this, and I'm so pleased that we've discovered you for New Thinking Aloud and are able to share your insights because I just find them inspiring and scintillating. And while I can't say that I come from a traditionalist perspective at all, I've learned to see it with new respect because of you.
Well, I'm glad, because there are a lot of worthy, at least philosophers and certainly some people who have gone beyond that level in the traditionalist world.
Well, Charles Upton, once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with me today, and I look forward to many more conversations. Well,
so do I. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, because like I say, when I speak on these subjects, I'm also a member of the audience. There's a part of me, because I suppose you would say because I'm a poet or have some kind of facility like that, where the words will come, and sometimes I'll be quite surprised at what they are. What? Because I'm sitting here as part of the audience. I'm saying things that I need to hear too, because I haven't necessarily realized all this stuff. It's come as poetry, and the distance from poetry to, this is what it says in the Quran, poets are those who say that which they do not. That's the danger. It says, apart from those who do good works and remember God often and vindicate themselves after they have been wronged. Now, those are the three things that allow a poet not to be misled and led astray by his own art. You do good works, I understand that. Remember God, be pious and do your spiritual practices. I remember that. I understand that. But what's this vindicate themselves after they've been wronged? It's like sometimes an inspiration can be an attack. It can wrong you. It wrongs you because it takes you beyond what you really are. And the only way you vindicate yourself after being taken beyond what you really are, which if it stays there, it's a great misfortune, is you have to live up to it. That's how you vindicate yourself. So, I'm telling you, the Prophet Muhammad did understand what poetry was very clearly, because poetry was so important in his culture, And what's interesting about the Quran is not poetry, and he had to make a point. First, when the angel Gabriel came to him and started to dictate the Quran, he totally freaked, and he ran home to his wife Khadija and like hid under the bed and he says, hide me. He says, I'm afraid I've become a poet, because his society was filled with ecstatic, crazy poets running around and who tended to be very unreliable types, And he says, I'm going to go, God, please, I pray that I not become a poet. And then he had good friends who came and said, don't worry, this is from Allah. You're not just a poet. The poets were inspired by the jinn. They were like all half magicians, and he didn't want to be that. So the Quran is the word of God, like poetry, but if you want to see what the higher level is, that doesn't have the drawbacks of pure poetry, even the greatest poetry. This is the noble Quran.
Well, that's very beautifully put, very inspiring, very insightful. Charles, once again, thank you for being with me. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you as well for being with us.